Today, we're going to be talking about two essential traits that not only can transform your personal life, but your professional life as well. We're going to be talking about confidence and emotional intelligence. See, confidence is that thing that'll help you to take action in your life, but emotional intelligence is the thing that helps you navigate the complexities of emotion and relationships. So how do we bridge the gap between the two? We'll explore this powerful conversation right after this. What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm mindset coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready? Welcome back to another episode of the Lorraine Lindsey Podcast show. I am all about mindset. I truly believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. And today we're going to tap in to the mindset of confidence and to the mindset of emotional intelligence. I couldn't think of a better person to have here in studio, but someone who's an expert on the topic. But before I introduce my wonderful guest, do not forget to hit the subscription button, give us a thumbs up, and definitely send us your comments. We love to hear how you're feeling about the conversations that we're having on this show. So again, subscribe. And without further ado, let me introduce my fabulous, amazing, all-inspiring guest. A little bit about Ms. Nada Lena. Nada Lena is the founder and CEO of Rise Up For You. She is also a #1 best-selling author, leadership and career confidence coach, and a 2-time TEDx motivational speaker. With over 10 years of experience as a college professor and a former top executive for education corporations, Nada understands that the importance of fusing education, empowerment, and leadership together as she works with her clients and speaks to audiences worldwide. She has a master's degree in executive leadership and has coached and mentored over 50,000 individuals around the world on self-empowerment, career strategy, and soft skills. Nada has been featured on hundreds of podcasts and radio shows, as well as a featured motivational and educational speaker on platforms such as TEDx Talks, the Female Quotient, the California Human Resources Conference, the World and Leadership Diversity Conference, Women of Influence, the Virtual Coach Expo, the Wonder Woman Tech, and the Human Gathering, and more. She has spoken on platforms alongside the greats such as Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Marie Forleo, and David Meltzer, just to name a few. She can be seen and heard on Canada's Global TV Radio Canada, Amazon Prime TV, and Bloomberg as one of the only female co-hosts of The Office Hours, a talk show that interviews celebrities, athletes, and world-renowned entrepreneurs. Most recently, she was featured on a billboard in Times Square, New York for her work. Nada has been awarded 20 under 40 professionals, California Women of Influence for Entrepreneurship in 2021. The Keynote Speaker Award from the Lebanese Collegiate Network, and the OC Sheriff's Award for her philanthropic work with the at-risk youth. Her company, Rise Up For You, has been featured worldwide and works with brands such as CBS, Google, Next 19, and various Fortune 500 companies, as well as small businesses, and currently has reached over 50 countries with their programming. Rise Up For You is proudly certified as a woman-owned small business and certified by the Society of Human Resources. That was a mouthful.
Thank you.
For a woman who is so young and so driven.
Thank you.
So I know for a fact that this conversation about confidence and emotional intelligence is an impactful conversation, especially coming from someone who embodies that.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about you before we get into this whole conversation, about what inspired you to talk about these things.
Wow. Okay. Big question. So how about we start from the beginning?
Okay.
That works?
Let's do it.
So I actually used to be a performer. My first career ever. I toured internationally around the world as a singer and a dancer, and I did like Broadway and musical theater.
Wow.
And I think that was the first time that I started to recognize that so much of your success is dependent on your internal skills, not the skills that you accumulate externally. So for example, when I first started performing, I would walk into a room sometimes with 500 to 1,000 performers. And at some point you all sound and dance the same. Mm-hmm. So I started to quickly understand that if I want to be casted in that tour of 40 people, something beyond my technical skill has to stand out. So that's where my journey of trying to understand like that personal development side of things beyond just my accomplishments and technical skills was really important.
Yeah.
So after performing, I became an executive of an education corporation. And in the evening, I was a professor for a community college. And I started to see the exact same things showing up. So these professionals that had PhDs, master's degrees, you name it, were constantly struggling in their success and in their career. They had everything they needed from a technical aspect, but they were struggling with imposter syndrome, perfectionist mindset, not feeling enough. They didn't understand how to communicate, how to lead their team. And so therefore their success was falling apart and they were constantly being crippled by what was happening in their mind and the relationships that they were cultivating. And simultaneously, I would go teach at the college in the evening, and every single year, the freshmen and the sophomore that would come into college, the exact same things were happening with them. Like they wouldn't raise their hand because they were afraid to ask a question. Some of you that are listening, you might have children that go through this. They would rather take the F and fail than look stupid and raise their hand. They struggled with stress and anxiety. And so I really identified that the biggest gaps and the challenges across the board, personally and professionally, were what we call soft skills, which are really, I think they're the most important skills. They're really difficult to achieve, but it's all the skills that we can't necessarily get a degree in. And that's kind of where I would say my curiosity around, how do we teach these skills to people and how do we get them to cultivate and understand the importance of them really began. I went through my own personal journey as well, and a combination of the experience as a professional and my personal journey led me to building the company today.
I love that you use the word cultivate as opposed to change, right? I mean, that's, of all the wonderful things you just said, that was something in the end that really resonated with me. Because I think that when we talk about confidence, when we talk about emotional intelligence, some people will think that some people have it and some people don't.
Yeah.
But when we utilize that word cultivate, it means it's something that can grow within.
100%.
So what is the gap then between confidence and emotional intelligence? Because some will argue that emotional intelligence, some people just have it and some people don't. Is that something that you can cultivate, and what comes first?
It's a great question. So they work together. So emotional intelligence, confidence, you will hear some people out there say that you're born with confidence. I don't believe that. And you hear other people out there say that, no, you can build it. I think it's a combination of both. I think that when you're a baby and you're born, you have everything you need, but the environment that you're born in can either quickly hinder your thoughts and your self-confidence, or it can continue to grow your self-confidence, right? So we all know those people that maybe they were born into a family that was really hard on them. Maybe there was some trauma. And so they didn't have that self-confidence growing up. And then when they got to a certain age, they realized that they needed to start building it. And that was missing piece. Then you have other individuals that came from a very nurturing and loving family. And that belief in themselves is just a foundation that they've been able to kind of carry throughout their life because of their childhood. But emotional intelligence, self-confidence, all these things absolutely can grow. But they take time and they're not soft, even though it's called a soft skill, they're actually really, really hard. And I would say the biggest challenge with building these skills is most people can't connect the dots that their success is contingent upon these skills.
Interesting.
So they spend a lot of time trying to, and I would say most people spend a lot of time trying to build things externally because they think it's going to make them happier, it's going to make them more successful. If only I can get this job, if only I can get this relationship, if only I lose this weight.
Right.
But they don't understand that that's the outcome of self-confidence and emotional
Absolutely.
intelligence.
I freaking love that you say that, because I tell people time and time again when I speak to people, a lot of us will focus so much on external factors. The if I get, when I do this, when this happens, this will come. So I love that you said that, because it is key that people get that we have to really be inward and really say and tap into self and say, what are the things that I'm lacking? And I actually heard this recently when people look at, like, I'm lacking self-confidence, right? And I heard this gentleman say this, and he's like, no, you're not lacking confidence. You're confidently focused on the wrong thing. So if you tell yourself that you lack, you're confident in that belief system that you lack. So it's understanding that confidence is something that is already within you. It's just, are you you confident in the things that are going to hold you back, or are you confident in the things that will propel you? And if you understand that confidence is already there, it's a matter of shifting focus on what you're confidently going to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's interesting because, from my perception, confidence, it really has two sides to it. But a lot of times we only hear the one side of it. Mm-hmm. I believe, and I talk about this in my book, that there's really two types of confidence. There's micro confidence and macro confidence. In easier terms, there's confidence, and then there's self-confidence, which are two totally different
let's
things.
talk about it, yeah.
Yeah. So, just to give a little bit of data, because I think this is really important. We work with thousands of professionals and entrepreneurs and influencers every year. And every year we ask them what their number one challenge is, and 83% say self-confidence. That's crazy.
Wow.
Right? That means only about 17% of the population are like, yeah, I'm confident, I'm great at what I do. Now, and we ask thousands, not hundreds. So this is a trend that we see every single year. We recently just looked at our data out of 4,500 professionals, so 4,500. The average score for confidence is 6.6 out of 10,
wow.
which is a D in the American grading system.
Yeah.
And 57% of the people that took our assessment were C-suite and upper management. Imagine that, right? So these are people that are like at the top of their game that still struggle with confidence.
I'm writing stuff down as you're talking, so I'm like key points. No, because this is important.
It's very important.
This is what people don't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
That the person that's doing it versus the person that's not are not really any different.
Correct.
Right? It's the only difference is they've learned to be actionable even though they're lacking or feeling like they're lacking that confidence.
Correct.
So we're not rare birds in that regard. But what do you think it is for the ones that are actually taking action, that are still feeling like they don't have confidence? What do you think sets them apart that makes them move forward anyway?
I don't think it does, and here's why, and I'll explain.
Okay.
This is where we go back to that confidence versus self-confidence, macro versus micro.
Okay, love it. Mm-hmm.
So most people, they spend a lot of their time building micro level confidence, which is the techniques, the categories, the competency, the skills, right? They're gathering things external to them. Individuals that are highly successful, but that are still struggling with self-confidence, they're probably just struggling in a different area. Meaning maybe they've been able to tap into that confidence in their career, but their relationships probably suck at home, or maybe they like really struggle with self-worth, and so they struggle with body image, they struggle with building relationships, they struggle in other areas of their life. So it's just selective. But the big thing to understand that it's important for the audience is that many of us build micro confidence. I'm confident in coding, I'm confident in technology, I'm confident in speaking, you're confident in podcasting, you're confident in this skill, right? I'm confident in my degree or whatever industry that I have built skill in. And this is what we're taught our entire life. Like if you think about when we went to school, we were taught to get good grades, a high GPA, and then if you go on to vocational or university, it's the same thing. What's your GPA? What are your grades? What certificate do you have? What accolades? What sash are you wearing when you graduate? All of these things are external to us. And so that's what our brain has been taught that confidence is. Right? The challenge with that is that when all those things fall apart and let's say the skills completely change, and this is what we saw with COVID, people had new jobs, they were getting fired, their skill was no longer relevant, all these shifts started to happen, and then people came to us and said, who am I?
Right.
What's my identity? Well, what value do I bring to the world? Because their self-confidence, which is that other side, was never cultivated, right? And so when all of that micro fell apart, they had no idea who they were, and they had no self-worth and no self-esteem. They just thought they were defined by all these things they gathered.
It's interesting you say that because I literally just came back from Kansas City. I was given the opportunity to speak to the Kansas City Chiefs rookie
I saw
squad.
That.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Really, really cool. And so the content of the conversation was the power of discipline and decision making. But to your point, what I found just through doing studies before I went there and even speaking to these young men was they have developed skills that have made them confident as athletes.
That's right.
And so when we look at their statistics where 85% 2 years after retirement are flat broke.
That's right.
It totally ties into that macro, micro idea of confidence because as I said to the young men, you're good at this. This is the thing that you've been bred your whole life to be. And so the skill set, the discipline, the focus on that one thing has made you this superb athlete. But who told you that you couldn't take that and be a businessman, an entrepreneur,
That's right.
an investor, something so that way the fruits of your labor can be plentiful? And exactly what you're saying, because when we have confidence in that micro skill, we'll ride that train for as long as we possibly can and not develop and build another things.
Correct.
I'm guilty of that, even having building this coaching business, saying, okay, I'm here, I'll stay here, and I stay there for a long time because I'm lacking the confidence elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say that's a great example, because we do know that statistically athletes and like high performing individuals, when they move on from that career, they get stuck, right? And they don't know where to go or what to do because, again, they've only focused on that micro level. But, you know, the really important thing to understand is that we have to build the self-confidence, which is not a self-confidence in anything other than yourself. It's an inner belief that you are enough, period. It's an inner belief that you can learn a new skill.
Absolutely.
So that when something goes away, that you haven't been shaken and that the core of your existence is still strong, and that you can easily say, hey, no problem. I got fired. I made the job didn't make me, let's go this way.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this relationship is no longer working. What have I learned from it? I still deserve a healthy relationship. It's this mindset that perfectionism prevents you from your potential. And I'm a huge advocate of that phrase, because when we get in our head and we try to make things perfect, it impacts our ability to take action. It's a mindset that failure is research to success. That even if you fail, that doesn't define you as a failure.
Yeah.
It just means that this project or this moment didn't work out. What did you learn from it? And then using it moving forward.
That's so powerful. Fire on ice, I call it. Again, something I candidly struggled with. I would learn and learn and learn and learn, and then get analysis paralysis, and then overwhelm myself, and then say, oh, I can't do this. Oh my gosh, this is too much. And then completely shut down. Just thinking that I was going to build a confident mindset by learning so much information, but not knowing that the inner compass wasn't in alignment with taking action in that. So it was like tactical stuff, learning that, but not being actionable and doing strategies and implementation because of the confident factor.
100%.
Yeah.
And I always say you can have all the knowledge in the world and you can keep accumulating, but if you don't have the self-confidence to take action, it's completely irrelevant. And I cannot tell you how many times I sit across from individuals that have so many degrees. It's crazy. I once sat across from an individual that had 3 PhDs.
Wow.
And she was like, I don't feel enough and I'm not getting to where I need to be. I'm thinking about going back to get another PhD.
That's what she knew.
And in my head, I told her, stop. This is not about your PhD.
Yeah.
This is about you. You haven't built that foundational self-confidence to take action. And so you're covering it up with all of these technical skills.
Right.
And that's why there are so many people that constantly consume. And I'm sure, you know, we're in the personal and professional development. So we go to conferences, like, you know, we're constantly growing ourselves. But I mean, there are times where I've met individuals that they're like, yeah, this is the 10th or the 15th conference I've been to. And I'm like, great. And how did you take action? And there's really nothing to show for it other than a conference ticket.
Right.
Right. And so that's where that self-confidence comes into play. And you know, when I talk about this, I talk about it from a research standpoint, but also from an experiential standpoint. You know, anything that I talk about with self-confidence, I have lived. So, you know, when I was an executive, I decided to resign from the company after about 4.5 years, sell my house, sell my car, get rid of everything, and move out of the country.
Wow.
For an opportunity called marriage. Okay. And 4 weeks after getting married, my husband asked for a divorce.
Wow.
So I lost everything. I went from a 6-figure executive to with a house on the lake and all this stuff to nothing. I had $100 and 2 luggage. That was it.
Wow.
And I replaced myself at the job. I came back home. I was on the airplane and I was just bawling because I was embarrassed. And I'm sure some of you that are listening can understand.
Yeah.
In my head, I thought, how does a successful woman that's educated get herself in this position, right? And I felt shocked. I felt embarrassed. I was like, what the heck just happened here? And I'm crying on the plane and I fall asleep because I was just crying so much. And my father came to me in my dreams. He passed away when I was 27, so before this happened. He came to me in my dream and he said, Nada, everything you need is already inside of you. You just have to rise up for you. That's where the name of the company came from.
Wow.
So I got back to California and I don't know what it was. I just started building Rise Up For You, the business. Now, I've never built a business before. I don't have a degree in business. I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. Like it wasn't even in my, like podcasting and everything that we're doing now. I had no concept of what this was. And all I knew is that what I had just gone through, it didn't define me.
Right.
I didn't feel like I wasn't enough. I didn't feel like I was a loser. I didn't shame myself for the situation. It actually did the opposite. There was this fire in me that was like, oh no, like I am way better than this, and this doesn't define me. And I started building this company, and that's that macro self-confidence that I'm talking about.
Right.
And with that macro self-confidence, I was able to learn the micro confidence, which is how to build a business, how to build a website,
All those steps,
how to build a podcast, all of these skills I didn't have before. If you go today and you look at our website, for example, or you listen to the podcast, I have an amazing team today, but all those things were built by me 5 years ago. Then I had no idea what I was doing.
I think you're saying something really key here. And I'm going to circle back to the lady with the PhDs and then your story. And when we talk about macro confidence and where that can birth, because your adversity, your obstacle became opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Right? That macro confidence is the uniqueness of the duality of our earth, right?
Yeah.
Dark and light, pain and joy. The thing that I've learned even to propel me forward is sometimes leveraging painful experiences, is saying, how can I confidently turn this around? To not only build my confidence, but to create purpose from this. How do I take this thing that's happening and create a compelling why? And I think that when you can be compelled by a reason why you do the thing, then it can help you to be actionable and build that macro confidence that you're talking about. And we talk about that lady with the PhDs and things like that.
Yeah.
Here is what I have experienced talking to people, listening to people, going to these conferences and things like that, is that we hide behind the micros, right?
Yeah.
I remember for many, many years, like you, I had a big corporate, big salary, sexy, very alluring job. But I was very successful at being mediocre because I wasn't stepping into my true light doing that job. I was using skills and those little tiny confidence that I knew there to build that place. And by the way, even though to everyone else, it was pretty and fun and, it made people impressed by me. But inside, I was really just miserable. It wasn't compelling me. It wasn't moving me. And it certainly wasn't building my confidence. So I have a question for you. When we do micro to macro, where do we find the emotional intelligence is most powerful in those two things? Do we have to find our emotional intelligence in order to find that macro confidence that we're looking for?
They're related. So now I'm going to talk like a little academically here.
Okay.
Confidence is a part of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, there's 4 pillars. There's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. The last 2 pillars that I mentioned have to do with you and people. So how do you connect with people? How do you talk with people? Your communication. The first 2 have to do with just you, which is self-awareness and self-management. Self-confidence exists in the very first pillar. It's the first step of emotional intelligence, which is why I love it so much. Because in order for you to build emotional intelligence, you have to have an emotional awareness, you have to have an accurate assessment of who you are, and then you have to have that self-confidence to be able to move to the next pillar of self-management, because self-management is where the action happens. It's, are you motivated? Do you have the discipline? Are you able to manage your emotions and your stress? So that self-confidence is the first thing we need to cultivate in order to get to the next step of EQ, which is now managing your behaviors, right? Everything's behavioral. See, I know by someone's behaviors what their first pillar of EQ is. Meaning, I know by someone how they talk, how they walk, anything that they do nonverbal behavior-wise, the thoughts that they have in their head, their behavior, which is that self-confidence. Because you can tell what people think about themselves by how they show up, by how they interact with other individuals.
Well, it's tied together,
it's
right?
It's tied together.
What you think, you also put into your body, into the
Yes.
fiber of your being. So a confident person walks differently than a person who doesn't have confidence.
Yes.
Yeah, so totally. Continue.
Yeah, so self-confidence, it is emotional intelligence, and it's the first step. And I always say, and a lot of times, again, when we work with entrepreneurs and leaders, they're like, well, we don't really need self-confidence. And I'm like, well, I guarantee you, if I were to ask your team how you're leading them, they're going to come back with some answers that you're not going to like, and those answers are going to be tied to self-confidence. Because I'm a huge advocate for saying and really believing that your self-confidence impacts your capacity to communicate. It impacts your capacity to lead. It impacts your capacity to make an impact. It impacts your capacity to serve. If you have all this crap in your head that's crippling you, that's telling you these negative thoughts, how you communicate with people is going to be a result of that.
Yes.
Your responses, your reactions, your behaviors are going to be a result of what's happening in your head, right? So a perfect example is, I was just talking to a client and they were telling me that they sit at the C-suite table and they were talking about a few things, and this executive knew that it was wrong. Like there were a couple things that they wanted to raise their hand with and they didn't. Said, well, why didn't you raise your hand as a C-suite executive and contribute to that meeting? Well, I didn't know if they would hear me, and I thought they might think that it's stupid. And I'm like, oh, okay, so all that self-confidence and all that crap that's in your head, it crippled you, right? It sabotaged you from being the leader you needed to be in that moment, which was raising your hand and saying, this isn't great, we should not do this for our organization. This is just one small example of how these things can get into our way, not to mention relationships, not to mention how we respond and talk to people. And I always say that when you don't cultivate your self-confidence and you don't have the courage to step into that self-confidence, you're slowly disrespecting yourself.
Yeah.
Because your body knows the difference. You were just talking about your corporate job, how you can feel like, this just doesn't feel right. Because your body understands that, okay, Lorraine, you know that this isn't for you. You know this isn't in alignment with you. Why are you still doing it?
So my question then, let's just say that the people that are listening are like, wow, she's saying a lot. And that sounds very powerful coming from a very powerful woman. And it's easy for her to say that because she just exudes this macro and micro confidence.
Yeah.
Right? She's learned in it. She's skilled in it. This is her business. How do I start? Where do I start? Because I think that people hear it, they understand it, but they don't think that it's something that they can get in their grasp. So where would somebody start assessing, first of all, where they're lacking, whether it's micro or macro?
Yeah.
And then secondly, what can they do? Because some people have environmental circumstances that keep them in lack. Some of that is dealing with pathology. And, in your lineage of just grandmother to grandmother to grandmother, building that in the fibers of the family's beings or what have you. Where do they tap in and start for themselves?
Yeah, and I'll take it back to me, where you said they look at me and they see this confident person. But remember that there was a time where I had no money, no job, just got my heart broken from a divorce after 4 weeks, lost everything. My dad died, and while I started building the business, my mother died. I built my company in a hospital. I took showers at the 24-hour fitness, and I would go back to the hospital and open up the laptop. How do you build a business? So the first thing I would say is take ownership of your life. Because the reality is it does not matter what circumstance you're in right now, whether you're at the very bottom, which I've been, right? Or if you just feel stuck, the only shift that's going to happen is when you take that step and say, all right, I need to change and create a shift in my life, and I need to be committed, not interested. There's a big difference.
Love that.
Because when you're interested in something, it's a thought. It's, I want to get out of this relationship. I'd like to grow in my career. I'd like to start that business. Is very, very different than this is what I want in my life and this is what I'm going to do to make it happen. And even if it's hard and I lose money and I struggle, I believe in myself and I believe that I'll be able to get out of it and move forward. The first thing you have to do is take ownership and commit to yourself. Because if there's no commitment, it's not going to happen. And that's why that self-confidence is important. The second thing I would say is that now you need to start rewiring your brain with your belief system. And you need to start asking yourself, is this serving me or sabotaging me? And there's a strategy that we use that we've built called the 4 Bs to believing and betting in you. And you can do this with me if you're listening. So the first thing is, what's one limiting belief? We have thousands, by the way.
Yes.
But what's just, including me, every person has it. There's no one that is excluded from having negative thoughts,
right.
just so you know. So first thing is just, what's one limiting belief that you have right now that's getting in the way of your success? And it doesn't even have to be career. It could be in your relationship romantically.
Yeah.
It can be with communication with your kids, whatever it is. What's one limiting belief that you have? Write it down. Okay. The second B, because there's 4 of them, what's the backstory of that belief? Because all of us are carrying thousands of beliefs around that don't even belong to us. They were projected onto us by other people who also didn't have self-confidence. And what do hurt people do? They hurt other people, right? When people have fear, when people have anxiety, when people are scared, they push that belief onto other people, right? Parents do it, teachers do it, friends do it.
And it doesn't mean that it's always, and I want to throw this in there real quick, because it doesn't always necessarily mean that it is that the person has bad intentions.
Malicious.
Sometimes we're getting information from people who actually have good intentions for us.
Of course.
And so we have to be able to also sift through that and decipher, saying, am I going to take this as tangible enough for it to be in my marching order for my life? Or can I look at them and say, I really appreciate that their heart's in the right place for me, but this is not the type of advice that's going to work for me.
Or that's their experience, right? Because sometimes people, they will tell you something based off of their lens, right? It's like, this is what happened to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that will happen to you. So you're right, it's not always malicious. But since we're born and since we're children, that process happens. The friends that we have, the teachers that we have, our parents, our culture, society, all of those things carry an energy and belief. And if we're not careful, they start to impact who we are and the core and the natural being of what we truly believe. So a lot of what's in your mind, half of it doesn't even belong to you.
Right.
And as you get older, you need to be able to decipher, where does this belief come from? So that's the backstory. That's
I love that. And I love that you started with the limiting belief that because years ago I took this course and I referenced it a lot because it was so powerful, but the landmark forum. And the thing that I learned was, you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
But if you start with what you know and you start to work on that and you start to peel back, the blind spots that you have will start to come out.
Correct.
And so I love that you say, start with the one thing that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt is the limiting belief that you have, and start there.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you said that, and then 2, and then I don't know if you finished the second B.
We got 2 more left. So then the third one is probably, I would say, one of the most important ones to understand is, what's the behavior that it's causing? Meaning, is it causing you to be aggressive with your partner when it's not necessary? Is it causing you to be defensive? Is it causing you to procrastinate? Is it causing you not to raise your hand in a meeting even though you have something to say? So whatever your belief is, guarantee there's a behavior that's attached to it. And you need to understand what that behavior is, because that's where the shift happens. So no matter what happens, we're always going to have limiting beliefs, right?
Yes.
And our limiting beliefs are going to have a backstory to them. But where we really want to make the shift is on that third B, which is the behavior, which is whatever the behavior is that it's causing, how do we then go to the 4th B, break the behavior?
Love that.
So that it serves us versus sabotages us. So even when you are in a meeting and you have that limiting belief that no one's going to hear what you say or that it might be stupid, maybe your normal behavior is that you just sit back. And now we want to shift that behavior to raise your hand anyway and say, I'd like to share something. What are your thoughts? And say it even despite the belief, right? And I always say, like, everybody has self-doubt, which we've talked about. Everybody has negative thoughts. Every single person. 80% of our thoughts are negative. Across the board, neuroscientists have found this out. I always say it's okay to let fear get in the car, but don't let that sucker take the wheel. Because the second it takes the wheel, it's going to drive you into the wall, or it's going to make a U-turn into a direction you don't want to go into. So I always say, let fear get in the car, let that limiting belief or that insecurity get in the car, and then just put a seatbelt on it and say, you're just going to chill right there.
It's so funny you say that. I love this because I do a thing with people that I coach of seeing fear as your inner child. right? So if people are like, you gotta fight your fears and conquer your fears. Like, no, not really, because you can't fight it. It's gonna be a persistent thing that's always in your life, but it's coming from the little kid in you. Those childhood experiences is where it all kind of started. It started to cultivate. And I'm like, if you saw yourself, your fear, as a little 10-year-old or a 5-year-old, and it was standing before you, how would you treat it?
Mm-hmm.
You would get down on its level and say, okay, I know you're trying to tell me something. You would carry it, you would protect it, but you wouldn't get rid of it. You would just nurture it. And so I love this analogy, because when you're saying put the fear in the car, I'm literally picturing a kid, my little 10-year-old self that's created these narratives, and putting her in a safety, child safety seat and locking her in and saying, okay, we're going for a ride.
Yeah.
And she can whine, are we there yet? Or all the things, but I'm going to get in the car and get behind the wheel. So I love that analogy to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you just said is beautiful, because I think that people also need to look at the inner child, or pretend that they're standing in front of their inner child when it comes to how they treat themselves.
Yes.
Because we often treat ourselves worse than we treat other people, right? I always say, okay, if your daughter or son or sibling or whatever it is, your best friend is sitting or standing in front of you, and they came to you with a problem or a challenge or a mistake that they made, you more than likely are going to be nurturing. You're going to pour love on them. You're going to lift them up. But when you yourself go through a challenge, or you make a mistake, or you're going through things in your life, oftentimes we beat the crap out of ourselves mentally. And I always say, okay, the things that you say to yourself, if somebody was walking down the street and they said that to you, would you handle it?
Right.
Most of us would be like, who are you talking to?
Right.
What?
Excuse me?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
So I always say, just like, you're saying with the little child, is sometimes we need to be able to do that with ourselves and be like, there's been moments for me where I'm like, Nada, get it together. Do not talk to yourself like that. Okay. You do not speak to yourself in that kind of language.
I literally had a week last week. I was like in my feelings. Okay. And I recognized that. And I said, okay, Lorraine, you're feeling sorry for yourself. You are not being the person that you know you can be.
Yeah.
And so you're ready to shrivel up in a ball and die because these things aren't going right. And I told myself, you have until midnight. Yeah. Get it all out of your system, girlfriend. And then you need to put your big girl pants on and start over tomorrow. But just to have that pep talk with myself. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you start to trap yourself into that mind. Mm-hmm. And you start to think that mind and that chatter is you.
Yeah.
And so really tapping in and saying, all right, it's happening. Yeah. This psychiatrist talked about his studies, or the way, I don't know if it's from his studies or the way he illustrates it, but he talks about the 3 operating systems of the mind, the human mind, the animal mind, right? And or the chimpanzee mind, as he calls it, and then your computer, which is your skill set. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and they each have different rates of speed.
Yes.
And so your human mind is your logic that really can talk you off the ledge, but it works so much slower, right? Mm-hmm. And so by the time it's coming up with a solution for you, the chimpanzee mind gets out of its cage and is running amok and doing all these emotions. But the skills is so rapidly faster that when we can develop skills of awareness, because learning to be aware is a skill set that you can
100%.
learn. When you take these skills, you can then tell the chimp, listen, I'm going to give you a banana. You're going to get back in that cage and we'll get back to you later. And so you can just kind of like move forward. And I love these 4 B's that you're talking about, because it gives a limiting belief. Mm-hmm. It brings it to the mind and to the awareness. I love what you said about the patterns, right? What are the behaviors that come with that? And what are you going to choose differently? And by choosing different, by being actionable, by saying, I know this is the behavior I normally do. This is the alternative that I'm deciding. So it's almost anticipating, getting ahead of it. I'm going to decide when this pops up, because I know that it will. I will do this thing different. That in and of itself is a recipe for confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one easy thing that you can do is even just write down, I normally do this when I feel this. Moving forward, I will try this, and then change the action. And even by just writing it down, it builds more self-awareness to what's happening around you. And I also want to just go back to what you said, everything that you talked about the human mind, the reptilian mind, or the animal mind, and then the intellect mind, that is emotional intelligence at work. It's being able to take all of these aspects of yourself and understand, when do I use what? and how do I use it to create the best outcome for myself and the people that are around me, opposed to letting them work independently. And that's what so many people do, is their brains work independently. It's like, here's my technical brain, and then I'm in like crazy reaction mode, and then I'm in like a subtle, right, rational mode. And what we want to do is bring them all together and identify, okay, how do I pivot and manage bringing them together? And also recognizing your thoughts are just thoughts. They don't have to become beliefs.
Right.
You can have a thought that is a horrible thought and quickly tell yourself, like, get that out of your head. That doesn't need to be a part of my belief system. And I think that's really important too, to understand and decipher what's just a random thought that's popping in, maybe because you feel scared or emotional in the moment, versus what needs to become a part of your core belief system.
What do you think is a healthy time frame? Because Joe Dispenza talks about this all the time, about synapsing thoughts, and that what you kind of said earlier. You know, I think he said something between 60 to 95,000 thoughts a day that we synapse, that are just random thoughts. But that 95% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts over time. Yeah. And if we continue those thoughts, especially if they have to do with catastrophic events in our lives, it creates a personality trait after a while.
Yes.
So when it becomes hardwired for people, the people that are listening and saying, okay, I get what she's saying, I'm going to do the exercise or whatever. What would you say is a healthy, reasonable time frame for people to get into? Because this is something you have to practice. Yes. It's not like I'm going to decide today, fall off the wagon for a month, and then try it again.
It's commitment.
It's that commitment.
Yeah.
And is it a daily thing that you feel like people have to do? How often and how long does it normally start to take for people to finally start to see, like, oh my God, this is working?
Yeah. I always say it's usually 60 to 90 days to see some kind of transformation. Not to be completely transformed, but to be able to see in yourself, oh, like I'm feeling better.
Yeah.
Right. Or I don't have as many thoughts that are preventing me from taking action. Or I finally raised my hand in that meeting. Or like, it takes about 60 to 90 days for you to start seeing shifts in yourself that you become proud of. And then when you become proud of yourself and you're like, this is working, then usually people accelerate in their growth, right? Because they understand how it's shifting them. But I always say, start with yourself first. Everyone is a little bit different. Right. And that goes to the breaking, which is that fourth B. Everyone's a little bit different in how they grow and the transformation that they need. Some people, they can write in their journal every day, like the limiting beliefs, and they'll start to see transformation, right? They're committed to it. They build self-awareness. They ask people for feedback. And so they are accelerating their growth by doing that. Other people are so maybe blinded by their beliefs, or their self-awareness is maybe a little bit lower than others, and they need a coach. They need somebody that exists outside of their skin to help them identify what their potential is and to help them identify, hey, did you realize that just came out of your mouth? I mean, I work with clients sometimes and they say the darndest things about themselves, and I'll say, why did you just say that? And they're like, say what?
Yeah.
Well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, you just cut yourself down. Why did you do that? What do you mean what did I say? Right? So some people need that heightened level. So I would say start with yourself by doing the 4 Bs. I would say commit to it every day, 5 minutes. Like, what's this limiting belief? And if you don't start to see shifts within like 60 to 90 days and how you're showing up, then maybe take that extra mile and accelerate your growth to something that has more accountability.
Yeah. Invest in yourself. If you can't figure it out, there are people that can give you the tools to help you figure it out. And and that's their life's mission. That's their purpose. And they're there to help you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we're lacking self-confidence, we're also not confident in investing in ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't think it's worth it.
Yeah.
You'll spend money on all kinds of shiny objects, but you won't put that same kind of money into yourself. And I think that that's important. Gosh, there's so much we could talk about this, but I know our time is concluding. But I want to ask you in conclusion, what are some, I mean, gosh, you've given so many nuggets, but what are some takeaways that you can give to people who are really struggling with this, are really, they're feeling very trapped environmentally, circumstantially, all of the things. They know they're hungry for it. That's why they're seeing these podcast titles and they're looking for it. They're searching for it. What could you say to them?
Okay, I'll reiterate some and then I'll add some.
Okay.
So first thing is start with the 4 Bs. Okay, start with, I call it crush limiting beliefs. So start with those 4 Bs and start making time to do that. The second thing is create a system for your life where you can make time for yourself. Because you can listen to these podcasts all day, you can go to conferences, you can do whatever, but that knowledge is only going to sit there if you don't make time to do the inner work by yourself.
Right.
So if you don't put in your calendar, just like a business meeting, just like, an office meeting, you have to put in your calendar. When I wake up in the morning, I don't work before 9 o'clock, and I do that on purpose. It's because I want to journal, I pray, I do my gratitude, I'll work out, I'll spend time with myself in silence so that I can check in on myself and ask myself, how am I doing? But what I'm really doing is creating intentional space to grow myself. So the second thing is you have to create time in your schedule for you. And if you don't, you're always going to be in reactive mode and you're not going to be able to grow. The third thing that's really important is your personal counsel. I mean, I'm sure you've mentioned this on the podcast. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So many of us have people around us that are absolutely detrimental to our confidence. They put us down. They have negative energy. They're going through so much toxicity and trauma in their life that by the time you're done hanging out with them, you're completely exhausted, right? And we've all had those people where we go home and we're like, oh my God, I am so tired, right?
Or I'm so down, I'm so depressed, I don't know why. Right. It's like that energy is getting into you.
Or you get sucked into things like gossip and talking about other people, and then you go home and you're like, that's not me. Like, I don't want to do that. So you really have to be intentional and set healthy boundaries around the people that you're spending the most time with. Find those people that are going to cheer you on, that are also on a trajectory of growth, that want to better themselves, that want to make a positive impact in the world. And the people that don't do that, I'm not saying cancel them because I don't believe in that, but just minimize your time around them and recognize that they will impact you, and you have to decide what kind of tribe do you want to have around you. I have a lot of acquaintances. I can count on one hand how many true council members I have in my life that I surround myself with the most, that when I hang out with them, I admire them. I'm like, dang, you excite me to be a better woman, or to be a mom, or to whatever it is.
But that right there, if I just may interject real quick, what you just said is super, super, super important, especially for women. We have to feel at least confident to be around people that we think are better than us. Because if they're truly the powerhouse that they are, they only want to see you succeed. And you can't be afraid to be in proximity to those people. Because I think the part of it why we stay with gossipers and people who are dramatic and trauma is because we don't feel we're deserving to be in space, to hold space with those kind of people. And I think that rather being competitive or jealous or envious of those people, embrace your women, or fellas who are out there that are next level, and don't be afraid of that. Know that you can build from that space, because I know a lot of people that don't spend time with people like that because they're either envious of it or they feel inferior to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where that self-confidence comes in, right? It goes back to that macro self-confidence of understanding that you are enough and you are deserving. And in order to continue that, you have to put yourself in spaces that allow that. I either admire individuals or I have empathy for them, meaning if they're in a dark place, I don't judge them, I don't cancel them, but there's that part of me that's like, I can see that maybe there's some challenges, and the way that they deal with it is by hurting other people or gossiping at, right? They're deflecting.
Or sabotaging their lives.
They're deflecting from what really needs to be happening. That's all it is. Or I look at people and I'm like, I really admire you and I want to be in your space. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You're really cool, and you excite me with what you're doing. And I have no problem being like, let's go do this, right? I'm like, hey, let's go do coffee, or let's whatever.
What's really interesting is that even as we talk about it, you light up differently when you think about the person you admire versus the person you have empathy for. You kind of your face drops, you get sad for them. And then the one you're like, oh, I'm excited. Just even that. So in that, and sometimes when people don't know, explore how you feel. Tap into the emotion. What's pulling you forward and what's repelling you backward. And sometimes if you don't know cognitively, listen to the inner compass. It will guide you. It'll teach you. But set the intention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are the things that I would say is crushing those beliefs, creating that system for yourself where you have time to work on you, surround yourself by a personal counsel, and then truly, truly commit to yourself. I always say that if you don't feel enough, nothing and no one will ever be enough for you.
Amen. Yes. Well, I thank you. This has been powerful.
Thank you.
I swear we could do
A couple more hours?
seriously.
Yeah.
Like, you'll have to definitely come back. How can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So you can head over to riseupforyou.com. All of social media is Rise Up For You, completely spelled out. You can also check me out, Nada Lena Nasserdeen. I'm sure you'll spell my name out in the show notes.
Yep.
So 2 accounts there. Rise Up For You is our entire team and company. Nada Lena Nasserdeen is just me. We're all over social media. If you go to our website, riseupforyou.com, we have a ton of free stuff. We have free classes on confidence. We have free classes on emotional intelligence. We have quizzes you can take to assess your confidence. It's totally free.
Love it. Thank you. You
Yeah,
are
you're
a
welcome.
powerful, amazing, and inspiring woman. So I
Thank you.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you got a ton of nuggets from this conversation. I feel like this was a powerful, powerful conversation. Again, if you like what we're talking about, you want more of this, do not forget to subscribe, send us your comments, give us a thumbs up. We love, love, love hearing from you. And until next time, ciao.